Hello there and welcome. My name is Jimmy Wikman, and in this video we are going to talk about approvals in Confluence that is finally happening. I'm not talking about an application like Komala here, I'm talking about native functionality for approvals. So this one was announced on July 10th, so a few days ago, and it has been a little bit unclear on when it will actually roll out. According to the post, it will roll out during the week, and many, including me, have noticed that we don't even have it in it's not even in the rolling out state yet in our application release notes. So this one will be a preview and my thoughts on what they have actually announced and where this compares a little bit with other approval applications like Komala Document Management, for example. So let's jump into the article and see what they are actually going to deliver for us. So this is the article that is published, and I will add that into the description below as well. So this is now coming from Ali, and she is very happy or even excited to share that approvals in Confluence are moving into open beta. So it's not in general availability, it's only in open beta yet. And one of the interesting things about this one is that I was actually going to make a video about one of the things that actually needs to happen in Confluence for it to become moving over from the wiki era into a more collaborative and more mature product. And one of the things was approvals, actually. We need to have that for ISO compliance, for example, for 9001 and 27001. So I'm really happy that this one is coming out. And I wish I could show you today, but we have to wait until I actually get it in my solution. So this one has been, I started using Komala plugins for data center 10 years ago or something like that. And this one has always been highly requested as a functionality that we need to have, especially if you want to have a system of record, for example, of processes and things like that, then you need to follow certain steps to ensure that people don't mess around with it. And approvals is mandatory for it. If you're also being serious of project management and you want to make sure the documentation of your project and your requirements do not actually move around, then you also need to have an approval process for it. So they're motivating a little bit, and for me it's nothing to motivate. Just give it to me and just take my money, basically. So they are giving a few examples here, and all of these ones are things that we are using Confluence for already today. So policies and procedures, obviously we need to have sign off for them so people don't just make them up willy-nilly. Legal and compliance content, if you're working with requirements, non-functional requirements, for example, can change, and you need to have legal things that are actually stuck. So if they update, it has to follow a certain process. Launch plans and campaign documents, it's basically requirements that we're talking about, finance operations and AR documentations. And this is now when we have record of decisions. So that's also an approval process for that one. And cross-functional project pages, I actually don't see the need for approvals for that one, except when we are talking about requirements. But these are all good examples of things that we need to have it. What they don't really have here, they just making it into policy and procedures. This is basically governance, process documentation, and things like that. So that's where at least I have some customers that are very strict about that one and need to have that one for regulatory reasons more than just because they want it. So let's take a look at what we're actually getting then. So this is what we are going to see now in the pages, at least in the first iteration. So we'll see how this one will actually evolve. So we have the little bar at the top here showing that this one is approval in progress. I am not sure this is something that we always want to show. So if we're talking about policies, for example, or we're talking about processes, maybe you don't want to show this one for everyone. Maybe you just want to show that this one is actually in progress by the people who have permission to edit, for example. Because this one, if I'm looking at, for example, a travel policy, for example, and I see that there's something else happening here, I want to know, should I follow this one or should I wait for this one to actually, the new rules to come out, so I don't waste a bunch of time. So how this one actually will show up, I guess we'll have to see, but I can see scenarios where you want to show it only to certain people and scenarios where you want to actually show it for everyone. They're introducing new review statuses, and this one I'm a little bit disappointed in, depending on how this one is actually done, because we already have statuses that you can actually add, and they are kind of pointless. And because unless you have some kind of workflow and actually set the structure for it, anyone can add anything you want. And these three might be good enough for many people, but not for everyone. So if this means that all we get are statuses, so you basically just have either it is approved in review or it is changed, then that's not going to work for regulatory industries. They need to have a workflow for it, actually. Because what happens if I go into review and I want to push back and say you have to fix this one, then I need to push it back and someone need to edit it. Right now, it basically just means that I have to decline it, probably, and then the changes will go where? We don't really know yet. We have notifications for, let me just remove this bar first. And we have notifications for key moments. That makes sense. So if I am being set as the page owner, for example, and there's a new change edit for it, and I want to know about it. And the same thing then if I am being chosen as an approver, I need to be aware of it. So yes, makes sense. Automation ready. This is, we already have when page is being published and then document approval. This doesn't work, and they have some comments here, because when you're working with approvals, you want to approve before the page is published. So this is one of the greatest weaknesses with the Kamala suite, for example, is that they cannot actually intercept the publication. They have to have a two-step process. You need to have a page that is being published, that is being approved, and then you have to have a second application that actually publishes it to a separate space or to another area. So you will always have two pages, basically, to have this one. So this one, start a document approval, this one will follow that process. So you publish something, and then you will have an approval on that new page, which is not what we want. And they have explained that you can, and I think this one actually comes in the next part here. So this one, we need to have a trigger that says when something is being published, and that one makes sense. You need to have that one as an automation, but we also need to have something for this scenario. So if I want to block publishing within a space until it has been completed, the approval, so what you basically have is a draft and a published page at the same time. So you have two versions, but the draft cannot be published before you get an approval on it. So it's kind of a middle step there. And we need to have an automation for that as well, because if I have something that goes into approval, which would make sense here, that when something goes into approval, I want to do certain things. And we also have an activity log, and this one is the important part when you come to ISO certifications, because you need to be able to show, to be able to be compliant, to show what kind of process do you have, when were things approved, how was it approved, who approved it, and these ones have to be saved for quite a long time. So if we look at whiteboards, for example, they only save these things, well, not approvals, they save the version handling for 30 days. And that's not going to cut it for ISO certification. So one thing is who actually approved when, and this is what we actually need to have. And the other thing is, can I export this somewhere? Do I see logs of this somewhere? So we have to wait and see exactly how this one can be handled. And then if it doesn't have it on version 1, we need to provide some feedback to Atlassian to actually tell them that this is what we need for ISO compliance. But this is great, and if you're thinking not just from a requirement perspective, perhaps, or document, if you think when we have a decision, for example, you can then add the people in the meeting that they all approve what was actually decided. And so then you can actually have a record of decision, which is great in this sense. This one is, I don't think they thought this one through properly yet, because what they have is then enforced approvers, and it is on a space level. So you can choose to require all approvals in a space to go through standard set of reviewers. So you basically have a little bit of a council for a space, which is great, but you also need to be able to combine that one or override that one if you want to have individuals on a specific page, for example. So this one is great, and they are also looking into this one like engineering leads or legal team members. So these are actually more like stakeholder groups or approval groups that you have for other purposes. So, for example, if I have an update for non-functional requirement that require legal to actually approve it as well, then how do I get it from both engineering and legal team? Can I select both? And this one is still a little bit unclear, because these are basically resolver groups if we're talking, for example, incidents. So in this case, it is actually approval groups of documentation here. So it will be interesting to see how this one turns out, because I think this one will need to be extended and approved upon a little bit. And you can also set up expiration windows for approvals, make sure that they get proper ones, so you can actually force people, saying that within a certain amount of time you need to actually have an approval decline. And you can also, I'm assuming you can also set up documents need to be refreshed, for example, at a certain interval. Otherwise, we need to have automations for that. Because this is also something that when you have like a lifecycle support here, if you have a document lifecycle, then it actually have to be alive. Otherwise, it should be retired. So I'm guessing this one will be the same here. So if you want this one and you have it, then you need to be on Premium or Enterprise. It is not clear yet if it will only be for Enterprise and Premium, or if it's just during the beta period. So we have to see about that one. But you need to go into your space settings, and you will find a new section called Status and Approvals, and then you can enable approvals. So this is on individual spaces, as I understand it. Now, what do I think about this one? Well, as always, I have a bunch of comments here, and one of the things I'm asking here is, for example, right now it's only for pages, and that's great. And pages are controlled in that sense. But what happens with whiteboards, for example? So if I want to do a system of record, for example, I want to have my process flows in whiteboards, and I want to have my process documentation in the form of a page. At the moment, you cannot have an approval process for the whiteboard. We don't even have proper version handling of whiteboards either, which means that it will not be ISO compliant. So if you want to use this one in regulated industry today, or rather when this one comes out, then you would be forced to use one of the plugins that you have for modeling your process. So I believe it is Glyphy, or I think Draw.io have actually the only one that is compliant with ISO. Don't quote me on that, but I think they are the only one who actually focus on that one. I think they passed Glyphy on that one. But that's one thing. And the other thing is, if you want to have this compliant, then you cannot have a scenario where I can create a page and I can set this one that it requires an approval for me to edit it, and then someone turns it into a live page, overrides this one, saves it, and then bring it back into a page, and bypassing the approval process by that way. Because they don't have approvals for live pages, as I understand it. So this has to be looked into also, making sure that that flow cannot happen, so you cannot bypass it, because then you cannot have it in regulated industries. And I would also say that you shouldn't have it for requirements or legal documentation or anything else if you need to have that one properly handled. So the other thing is then, let me go back to the statuses here. So one of the reasons we need to have more than just a status is that you often have scenarios. They already talked about it actually here in the groups. So if you think about this one, no, sorry, this one. Where is it? Here we have enforced approvers. We're already talking about engineering leads or legal team members. So we can have entire groups that actually approve something. If we are looking into how to change a process, for example, that could mean that you have 2 or more groups involved in that particular process. So if you think the build process, for example, that one includes requirements, design, developers, and even operations to actually handle all of these things, testers as well. Which means that if I change that process in some way or change how other parallel processes like vendor management or financial processes actually ties into that one, then I cannot just do that one and ask, for example, developers to approve it. That doesn't work. So we need to have multiple groups, and sometimes you need to have a workflow. So in this case, it could be that it needs to go to more than one approval. So then the question is, how does that function? Because it could be that we need to have an approval from an operational level and then a second one from strategic level, or vice versa. And this is where statuses will not actually cut it. So unless you were going to have some way to actually set automations based on which group approved the first time and then have a second status that is the same as in review here, for example, in review 2. And no, we need to have workflows for this one. And we also need to be able to set automations based on the workflow. So we basically need the same thing that we have in Jira for this one. Because we also need to make sure that people cannot assign themselves, for example. So if I look at this one and I need to assign someone that approves, I can assign myself. We need to be able to set rules for that one and saying that you cannot assign it to yourself and override an approval that way. There's a lot going into this approval status here. So this is the new announcement. I love it a lot, and there's a lot of things to unpack and test and verify here. But I think it's a good start. So let me just finish this one off then with some thoughts here. I really, really hope, now this one is now again rolling out in July, in the middle of the vacation period. This one will basically kill Comala, Comala Publishing and Comala Document Management, because it is exactly the same solution that they are now presenting here. It's even very similar to what it looks like. So I sincerely hope that they have had long discussions with Comala and other app vendors about this one, because you might have seen that I posted a video a couple of days ago about how Atlassian have already pissed off a lot of partners by not having a proper process for communicating with the app vendors on upcoming changes, and the fact that they are doing it in the middle of the summer when people are off, and which is not great. So if you haven't seen that one, it should be up in this corner here. I will add a little link for that one so you can see that video as well. Overall, I think this change is a sign of Atlassian, especially the Confluence team, which is, I don't know what they are on over there, but they are doing incredible things and moving in incredible speed. So I think we will see a lot more things like this, and I think it will affect the marketplace quite a bit, because there's a lot of things that they haven't done with Confluence yet, and that a lot of people asked for decades, that they seem to now pick up, and they are realizing that they are moving towards a more enterprise solution instead of just having a scribble place or documentation. It's not a Word document we're talking about. This is Confluence, a collaboration space now. It has evolved quite a bit over the last couple of years. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about approvals as presented right now? And remember, this is first draft. This is not going to be the final version of approvals. And this one will evolve over time, and it's important that we provide feedback, especially from regulated industries. And I think certain work groups, like requirement analyst, for example, or business analyst, you need to speak up a lot on what you need to see here in terms of control. And also, I think it's important for legal teams that have very strict rules for this, and possibly also business processes. So if you're working with BPNs, or if you're working just with regular process maps, work processes, and make sure that you now speak up and try to get Atlassian to move towards a solution where we can actually have a system of record now for processes in Confluence with whiteboards, which would be the ultimate solution. So that is all I had for this video. I'm really excited to see this one. I've been clicking every day here now 15 times a day just to see if I get this new functionality so I can test it out. And as soon as I have it, I will do a full review of the functionality and give you my thoughts on that one. But with that, all I have left to say here now is that I hope that you have a great day and an awesome week.